All right. Good afternoon. Good evening. Welcome to Powered by Authenticity. This episode I have been wanting to have for quite some time. It's featuring Carrie Gallant. Carrie, good evening.
Hi, Emily. So great to see you today. Finally, we get together.
I know. Yeah. So for all of our listeners, this is the third time's the charm for this conversation. We had some definite sound issues in the past, but we've got those resolved for tonight. But thank you for sticking with us and agreeing to still be on the episode. I really appreciate it.
Well, of course. I mean, we're that committed to bringing this to everyone that we wanted to come around and try it again.
I know. And this is a fun topic. So we'll get into it. But, the whole idea of human design and how that, features into our leadership and just to our careers is very fascinating to me. So I can't wait to get into the nuts and bolts of the conversation. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, a little bit about your company, your podcast. Tell us all the good stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we were just chatting about where I am from, which is Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So just about a 2.5-hour drive up the coast from Seattle. And my business is the Gallant Leader Institute. And we work with women executives and leaders to help them nail their negotiations in the boardroom and beyond, and their leadership, and so that they can be the authentic executive leaders that the world needs them to be. And my podcast, which is on YouTube at the moment, later this year it's going to be coming out fully on Apple and Spotify, is called the Tall Poppy Revolution Radio Show. And one of my previous guests was Ms. Emily Carlson. Ta-da! And at the Tall Poppy Revolution Radio Show, we're really talking about and with executive women leaders who are standing out with their heads above the crowd like a tall poppy, where they might be risking a lot standing up that tall. And so we want to bring us together, women together, so that we're not standing alone and risking getting our heads chopped off like a tall poppy and supporting each other. So that's really what the Tall Poppy Revolution Radio Show is about at core. And we talk about a lot of different topics. The world is only really still just catching up to women's leadership. So that's what we want to be talking a lot about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I loved our episode together, and we'll link it in the show notes. And actually, just the visualization of the tall poppy, I love that so much. So that's awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. And we actually, speaking of the world kind of coming together, we met through a networking event at Innovation Women.
That's right.
We were talking all things podcasting, and we kind of clicked and connected. So that was, just a really fun demonstration of how, like-minded people coming together with similar missions and wanting to drive change through discussion. I think that was just it's a great, hats off to Bobby and what she's doing there too. So awesome. Well, I hope you'll indulge us because we like to do a little bit of an icebreaker just to get to know our guests. So just really curious, any big events or vacations that you're looking forward to in 2025?
Yeah, I love this question. So first of all, let's talk about vacations because that's what we live for in many respects, right? So this year we're probably headed back to Vancouver Island, where we love to play out in the wild, if you like. We do a lot of gravel biking and swimming and paddle boarding and just whatever we can get out and do outside. And a dear friend of mine lives over there too, so it's a great opportunity to see her because otherwise we're on Zoom a lot too. And but it's great to be in person with her. And so that's likely going to be our main vacation. And then for other events, I'm really looking forward to two primary events this year. One is here in Whistler, British Columbia, and it's called the W North Connect Conference. And W North is a women's leadership organization started by women in Whistler, but now we have chapters all over the world. In the U.S., I think we've got them there might be one coming soon to Chicago, but there's definitely one in New York, there's one in L.A., and there's one in Texas somewhere. Can't remember exactly where. I'm sorry. And we've got them all over Canada too: Vancouver, Victoria, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal. We've got them in London, England, So not yet in Australia. So if anybody's listening from Australia and is really curious, then get in touch with me and I will help you figure that one out. Anyway, it's hands down in my experience. I haven't gone to all of them, but I've gone to a lot of women's leadership conferences. But in my experience, hands down, it's the best because it's small-ish. I mean, hey, any Canadian conference is going to be a tenth the size of a U.S. conference, but so there's some intimacy, but there's some built-in intimacy in terms of getting to know each other and to working together to help support and lift each other up. Great topics and really actionable takeaways from that conference. So that's number one. Number two event that I'm looking forward to is my human design coach is having a conference in Poughkeepsie, New York at the end of April. And I'm really looking forward to going to that because we get to mastermind together. I'm in her coach school and learning and applying as I go, as I leverage up my leadership and my knowledge and awareness for myself, and then translate it back to my clients and my audience to help people grow into their best and most authentic self.
That's amazing. Those events sound great. We do have listenership actually in Australia, so maybe we'll definitely link that into the show notes as well. And I agree with you. Vacation's the good stuff too, right? Like we work so hard. That's amazing. I wish it was a little bit closer to Poughkeepsie so that I could meet you in person. A little bit of a drive.
That would be fun.
Yeah, awesome. Hey Ken, how are you tonight?
I'm doing all right.
Any big vacations or events you're looking forward to?
Oh, kind of looking forward to getting up to Northern Ontario and doing some fishing here. And I think I counted about 8 to 10 weeks at this point. So not that I'm actually counting.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I'm looking forward to that same location at the end of July. For events, I've got a fun one coming up on March 27th with the Women in Tech Network, the Buffalo chapter. I sit on their board, and there's a big WIT event coming to Buffalo. So that's going to be a really fun one. It's just a great opportunity to network. So thanks for sharing, Carrie. We love to get to know a little bit about people on a more personal note. So we thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about the work that you are doing with your organization. So tell us a little bit more about the types of really, work that you're doing through the Gallant Leadership Institute.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I work primarily with executive and C-suite women leaders and some who are upcoming, looking to level up into that level of leadership for themselves. I also work with corporations primarily around negotiation and communications training. And when I'm working with the women leaders, a lot of that is one-on-one work. For example, I just got off a call with a client who is working on the next level for her in terms of what's being created in her organization as she's expanding her role at the C-suite level to include another area of responsibility and navigating not only the conversations going forward around what that's going to look like in real life in terms of who does what, when, and where, but also strategically around her discussions with her leader around her compensation and how that's going to knit together. So I work with a lot of women on their negotiation strategies. And one of the things, and I know we're going to talk a bit about human design today, one of the things I love about now knitting those two together is that the human design blueprint is really, in this client's case as an example, is really helping inform her about how to bring conversations forward, how to navigate her energy, navigate where she's putting that energy, and also how she's leveraging the most out of her role because it fits and how it fits with her blueprint, if you like. Yeah. And so I've always kind of believed that, negotiation, like leadership, because negotiation is an incredibly important part of leadership, is an inside-out job. Yep. A lot of leadership and negotiation training, including a lot that I've been involved in delivering, is outward focus, i.e., it's focused on the tactics, the words, the phraseology. But if you don't address the inner, and I think this is super important, especially for women and anybody who's in a non-dominant part of society. And by that, I mean they are not part of the dominant group. Now, that could be, we could talk about, for women, it's not being male. And for many, it's not being a white male. And so our society, it's just, we have to normalize that it was built by and for, mostly for white men. And so all of the ways things work are linked into that. And that includes even the negotiation structure. And so that can butt up against someone's internal clock, if you like, or internal, the way they are built, whether it has to do with their gender, their race, their cultural background, lots of different variations on that. So I always like to bring the inside and the outside together, especially when I get an opportunity to work more closely with a client and really watch that trajectory shift, because if we can't let go of some of the subconscious and unconscious beliefs, ways of, and even habits, it's really hard to do something new and different. And for many, going into a new leadership position or going into a negotiation where they've never had one before, or having a difficult conversation in a really awkward situation, it's asking us to do something that sometimes our bodies and our psychology doesn't want us to do, right? We're trying to fight against ourselves. And so that's why I really think the inner and the outer work really well together. And human design is turning out to be the best way to access that.
Yep. I think, and so the word negotiation to me, just it really pops because when you hear that word, you think of the big things that have to be negotiated, right? But every day we have to negotiate our time and, maneuver and negotiate, decisions. And, there's an influence there that goes along with that. So, when you use that word negotiation, I love it because it's what we do. We're negotiating our time constantly, and I love that you use that word because I just think it's so important.
Well, I'm glad you love it because I think a lot of people don't, and I think it's gotten a bad rap in many ways where many people, and I find especially women and those again for whom it hasn't been okay to speak up, speak out, stand tall, be a tall poppy. It can feel like, oh, I don't want to do that. Or it could be the opposite. I know I should be better at that. I know that's something I need. But also there's all kinds of layers as to why they haven't yet or why they might be resisting it. I mean, hey, I don't always want to do it myself. And, because we're having because it starts first with understanding what it is that we want. That's not always an easy question. So number one, I always start with in any negotiation is really getting that clarity. And turns out from a human design perspective, this is one of my strengths what we call our superpowers is one of mine, is to help bring confusion to clarity. And by the way, I'm much better at doing that for other people than I am for myself because as we know, physician heal thyself, that phrase is there for a reason. And for many of us, it's much harder to integrate that for the self. So that's actually something else for me to work on, separate and apart from that. But I wanted to just sort of normalize that can be true for many of us. And so I like that you love it because it's better than it being a bad word because as you said, Emily, we actually are negotiating all the time. Yeah, there's some that are more formal, more high stakes than others, but really the process and the principles are the same.
Yep. When I think of that word, I also think of the word influence because you have to be able to influence the other parties that you're trying to negotiate, even yourself. Like you have to be able to influence what's right for you and get all of that other, I call it my noise. I have to get out of my noise and make the decisions and influence what's the right thing for myself. So, I think those words, almost go in tandem.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they do. They do. I have them together like this. Influence and negotiation are like besties, right? Yeah. They are sister, brother, twins, identical, well, let's say fraternal twins, because they are knit together. Influence and negotiation is really what I'm working with clients.
Yeah.
And I think for some, the word influence gets a bad rap too, because they might perceive it, or negotiation itself, as being manipulative. And I put that in air quotes because I think we've given that word a bad rap too, because if you look at the roots of manipulate, it comes from the Latin word for hand, man, right?
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is we're moving things, we're changing things. So when we're looking to manipulate something, we're looking to change its structure, change it somehow. And that's really what we are doing with influence and negotiation.
Yeah.
And ideally, we're not doing that to force someone else to do something they don't want to do, because that rarely works out, especially in the long term.
Yep.
But rather, we're trying to negotiate something that, and we're working together often. That's the real course of things, especially when it comes to leadership, is influencing and negotiating with people with whom we have a long-term relationship, or we're going to be in some kind of ongoing relationship with. And that often gets lost in the shuffle when we're just thinking about the big capital N negotiation word or influence. We lose sight of that. And that's something that is so integral and important to a successful negotiation.
Yep. And, one thing also, just as we're talking through this, there's no course in any MBA program or, that gets down to this level of discussing words, nope. Like negotiation and influence. And so I think it's so important that people look for opportunities like working with yourself to say, you can teach me the book. Now teach me the art, right? You got your art and your science. Now teach me the art with how to work with these types of words, and what that really means. And, I love that you have this available for people. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. And it's funny that you were talking about the courses, because I used to teach negotiation at the law school here at the University of British Columbia and at a few others in Canada. You're right. We can teach a lot of the core teachings, don't get down to this kind of granular level. Yep. But even then, I was squeaking in some of the little personal development, because my first degree was in psychology. So kind of bring the two together, because and really, quite frankly, both law and psychology are about human behavior. They both are, right? So, when we're looking at shifting our own behavior or looking to influence someone else's, that inside out approach, knowing yourself and looking to know or to understand what's up for the other person is really critical. Again, back to what makes effective negotiation. So thank you for seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and one thing that I'd love to discuss a little bit more is that human design piece. So talk to me about how, more about what that means and how you can find out, kind of your own personal blueprint, if you will, to your leadership style and the way that you may lead. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. And then for some of your listeners, they might be going, huh? What do you mean human design? What is that? And so I'll try and keep the description of it pretty short, but really human design is a relatively recent tool, if you like. It was developed, or really it came to a man named Ra Aruhu in the 70s, and he divined it. It was one of those downloads, but it also reflects 2 or 3 ancient wisdoms, such as the I Ching and the chakra system, as well as astrology. And before any of your listeners go, oh, it's just all this woo-woo stuff, think about the moon for a second, and think about the science behind the planets, the planetary movement, the energy that happens when the moon shifts every month and the tidal changes, the tides change, right? I mean, think about the power of the moon. So I want you to realize that this is also based in quantum physics and science. It isn't woo in the sense that, and woo, by the way, isn't a bad thing. It just means that it's things that we can't see. And we think we can't explain them because we can't see them. But quantum physicists have grappled with that for well over 100 years, and we know that we can actually follow particle movements. So think of human design as something more akin to that, and what it means when you're born at a specific time in a specific location in a specific year, and that is when your blueprint is crystallized. So here's one of the reasons why I really like human design. I've worked with a lot of different psychological tools and assessments over the years, including the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI, as some of you might know it, DISC, True Colors, all kinds of different ones. And here's how it differs. Human design is based on one thing and one thing only, and that's your birth date, the time of day you were born, and the city that you were born in, city and country. So basically those three things. You can't fudge that, right? Now you might, I know, Emily, you and I have been in discussion about this. You might not know exactly what time of day you were born, and we can work with that. We can sort of find ways to fine tune around that, because for many days, there's only a couple of different major shifts. There might be some micro shifts throughout the day. I don't do this. I can massage this a little bit with people. I've done it before with good results. And when you need to go to get a specialist, then we need to find somebody who can really figure that out for you. However, the other assessments, all good. They all give us information. But the distinction is that most assessments, all the other assessments, rely on your self-reporting, your answering questions, your being in the mood to answer questions. And what mood are you in when you answer those questions? And how aware are you of all of the things that they're asking you about? So there's some built-in biases in every assessment that is self-reported for that reason. Now, it doesn't mean they're not accurate or they're not going to get close. But often, I know this because I'm qualified in delivering the MBTI, that it's really, at the end of the day, it's your decision as to whether that's the right fit. Even if you take it and it says, I'm an ENTJ, well, you might not be, right? So I was an ENTJ when the first time I took it, and the next time I took it, I was an ENTP. Why? Because the role I was in at the time I did the Myers-Briggs was much more on the J side of the JP continuum than on the P side. But when I was in another role, or in my current one, I come out more as a P. So that just gives you an idea of how we can have those self-reported. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they can shift a little bit over time because we change over time. Yep. Now, the nice thing about human design too, though, is the way I've learned it, in combination with the gene keys, which is another iteration of human design, is that there's a growth line in there too, in the sense that we can see our blueprint. So basically, let me back up a second. So what human design gives you when you get what's called your body graph and all of the interpretations that go into that body graph is it basically gives you a blueprint. So it's like a blueprint for your life that shows you what your potential is, what your highest self at its fullest expression, what that potential looks like. It also gives you a shadow side. So you can see where your challenges might be in certain areas in your life. And then in between those two is what's called a gift. So it's like there's a transformational pathway within your blueprint in every one of the 64 what are called gates that make up your profile. And there's 4 of those gates that are primary, that are about 70% of your blueprint, which is usually one of the places I start with clients, is working on that part. And so just to give you kind of a flavor, it's a little bit detailed, but there's lots of places to go. And as I said before, I'm finding it tremendously useful for myself. And also with clients, they're getting great results from working with their blueprint, and we work with it. It's just kind of there as we're working together, as they're working on the challenges that they're trying to work through in their leadership, and noticing how this is helping them make decisions, navigate difficult conversations, and all kinds of things.
And I can see, because like if you know that information, how you might respond or react, especially if you look at like a confrontational discussion or something that might be uncomfortable. I could see we're having like kind of that know-how of just myself and how somebody's, like how I might respond in a situation. I could see what would be super beneficial, especially if you're a young leader, or you're trying to make the next step as a leader, getting a little bit closer to who you are and how to handle situations based on how you will best perform could be super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, one of the other things I haven't mentioned yet, Emily, which is really, I have found super helpful, is it actually reflects where you might risk burnout. I mean, burnout's such a big problem in our organizations and with people's physical and mental health. I mean, we've come out of the pandemic now, but now we're going into something else in our world that is also having a lot of repercussions in the workplace and in people's personal health. And so, like there's 4 main types in human design, one that has 2 flavors to it. And each of those has a different way of having access to energy. And so even knowing that can be super helpful for someone to understand why they might run out of steam in certain types of work or certain ways in which their workday is structured. So that can actually be part of a person's transformation, is even looking at it from that perspective, is how do I manage my energy in the most effective way for me and ultimately for my organization? Is this the right way for me to be in this role? Is this role even the right one for me? We can actually look to the blueprint to help us discern those questions, the answers to those questions.
Yeah. And actually, something popped into my head when you were talking about the pandemic. And one thing I think leaders need to be aware of are the generation that was truly impacted by going home were those that were freshmen in high school, and those high school formative years where socialization did not happen. And so, I look at my daughter, and I've talked about this before, she never went back into high school until she was literally a senior. And so, her viewpoint, her energy going into college, and I'm sure that's going to go into the workforce as she continues to work, out of what it's different for those kids. The energy levels as a leader, it's got to be different for me and how I'm going to handle that generation. They deserve, the opportunity to be managed differently, the same, but probably a little bit differently than somebody who, is a seasoned employee, So I think there's you raised something there that just really, sparks something, and thinking about from a leadership perspective, how we need to look at kids who will be graduating from college in the next couple of years, and how we're truly going to manage differently to make them successful.
Yeah. Absolutely, Emily. And, I think the thing that's, to me, one of the things that's so unique about human design is that it really allows for that uniqueness, and even the uniqueness within that cohort, for example.
Yeah.
And so, there's a difference for a generation that has not had the same social interactions as others. And, I see that too in many workers who are reluctant to come back to the office, even when they have a hybrid, even if when they're not being quote unquote forced back into the office. But for hybrid, most people would say they'd much prefer to work at home. But here's the thing, for some people's type, now I'll give you mine, for example, one of the aspects of my type is actually the networker, is to be connected, is to be social. Not all the time. But to live to my full potential, I need to be in communication. I need to be in interaction. And most of us, not everybody, but quite a lot of people need to be interacting with others in order to rise to their full potential, to rise to what's going to feel ultimately most satisfying for them in their life and their career. And that includes that generation too. So my question, my curiosity is, how much has this become habit for us? And how much of that habit is a response to the fact that for many, their workplaces are not whole. So why would they want to come back and work in the office? I mean, for one of my clients, it's not that his team is ineffective or toxic, because he's certainly been in that experience. But for him, it's the building, the physical building itself that is sick. And so that's a structure. That's an example of a structure and or a system that is not welcoming. And so I think your point is a good one. As leaders, we want to be able to look at different groups of people who may be behaving differently, but also recognize that there's some variations. There's going to be unique and individual variations within that. And also to look at, there's lots of things to look at in terms of, are we providing, do we have the right environment? An environment means a whole bunch of different things, the right culture for success in our organization, for our people, but also for the organization as an organism itself.
Yeah, you used the word culture, and that's where my mind was going when you were talking about that, because so many organizations, they use the word culture and they want it to be a good culture, but they do not dig into the individual employees who work there and understand what's going to make it a good culture for everybody to thrive. I mean, you're always going to have, I think, outliers, right? You can't make everybody happy, but you can provide an environment where people would succeed. So if you got to know the human design of the teams that you are working with, couldn't that make for just a better workplace experience? And I think it's a missing element for a lot of organizations. I think just bluntly, people with budgets are tight, so they have to focus on where we spend. I think more need to spend more on the employees and getting to know what can help drive them and get to know them to that level to make it a better experience. And that leads to better revenue, and it goes together. But it's funny. Culture was like just right there when you were talking through that. So
I love the way you said that, Emily, and I love what you're saying. One of the beautiful things about human design is going back to the 4 types, and the 5th one that's really there's one of the 4 types you can sort of separate into 2 that are related. But an organization, especially a large organization, actually needs all 5 types, or at least the 3 primary ones. 3 primary ones. No, actually, probably 4. Most don't have the 5th because it's an extremely rare type, but it's essential in large groups like society in general. Mm-hmm. So one of the 5th type that I'm talking about are what we might call the reflectors or evaluators. They're the ones that mirror back the health and functioning of the society or culture as a whole. So a whistleblower might fit in that category or not. I'm not sure. But they're the ones that can see what is really going wrong or what's really going right in the health of an organization. So think about how many large organizations aren't finding that person and ensuring that there is that person there somewhere who's able to telegraph that. Yeah. If we had that in every organization, we might not have ever gone through Enron, in the 2009. And we need the other types. And so it's important to always be recognizing from a culture and organizational health perspective that we need more than just one type of person working in an organization, running the show, not just running the show, but working together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. One thing also that you mentioned was networking, and I do love to ask guests about, how has networking played a role in your career and how to grow and expand your not only your company but yourself. And you did mention networking at one point, so I'd love to hear your feedback on just your perspective of the importance of networking.
It's a great question. And I think we can't underplay the importance of networking, especially in our world. I learned a stat. I don't even remember what the number was, but years ago I learned that the vast majority of jobs are not published. They're not like published in the newspaper, for example. Because that's where everybody was going. This is back when we had actual newspapers. You'd open up the Toronto Star or whatever newspaper you had to look for a job in the classifieds. That's the classic
thing, right?
Feels
like forever ago.
Right? Well, almost every one of the jobs I've ever had I didn't get because it was advertised.
Yeah.
One, I went to, Manpower, as it was called. I think
yeah.
it's called that, which drives me crazy. I went to Manpower for one of the jobs I had in the summer between I don't know, grade 12 and I went to 13 at that time.
Yep.
Because we had a grade 13.
Yep.
But everything else has been through somebody saying, oh, I just heard about X. You should go and try that. Or even finding out that the job had been posted came through my network. I didn't find it in the paper, or I didn't find it online. So I realized looking back in my career that's exactly how I got every job, was through some kind of word of mouth. And about 80% of my clients come through, no, actually that's not true. About 60% of my clients come through word of mouth, whether it's somebody referring to me, whether they're a former client or a colleague, or typically it's somebody who's heard me speak. So this is the interesting thing. When I learned about my profile, my blueprint, I realized, wow, yeah, this whole network thing has been really important to me, and it continues to be super important to my personal health and also the health of my business. And so even attending the network, where a network group that you and I both met at is a women speakers networking meeting about podcasting. And the second part of it is in my blueprint is that the reason why referrals and my speaking has worked so well is because people need to experience me. My profile tells me why I'd never really wanted to go. A lot of people are going into the DMs, right? The direct messages, and doing, marketing in the DMs on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, or, doing selling online direct to customer. That's not me. That it never felt right. But now I have an answer why, because my blueprint is not meant to interact with people that way. Mm-hmm. And so what's really fascinating is that I can get your blueprint tomorrow and tell you whether that's a strategy that would be helpful for you, or whether you should just, don't even bother, right? Yeah. Which is really nice, because then it just clears the deck of any programs I might look to increase my marketing skills or beef up this part of my business, because if they're going down that direction, it's not for me. Because I'm not for everybody either, right? So, and that's okay.
That's okay. And you know what? I'm just going to put this out there. The amount of messages I get on LinkedIn of, please buy, or please meet, or please, and, or the phone calls, it's not for me either. And so I appreciate you saying that, because I can feel that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I could talk all day. I really could. I just love this topic, and I love, the work that you're doing. And I do think it's important. I really, for everybody listening, getting to know yourself and the way that you respond to situations and things that will make you happy just based on, who you are. I think it's something that's so valuable. So, Carrie, I think the work that you're doing is needed. And, I really do wish, organizations would come to you and say, tell us about, just to help cultures shift and just to help people understand how they're best going to succeed. I just think it's such important work.
Oh, thank you. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. So what is on the horizon? Anything fun coming up? Any new events coming up that you want to share?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I have my own show, the Tall Poppy Revolution radio show. And I know, Emily, you already said that you were going to include it in the notes, and she's nodding. So I'm taking that as a yes. So if you'd like to follow me there on YouTube, we have new episodes coming out every couple of weeks or so. And they also go live on LinkedIn first. So if you're on LinkedIn, you might want to join us there live, because we can get some interactivity with questions. So I've got a bunch of new episodes coming up with that, and that's always exciting. And then I'm working on a couple of new programs where, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really integrating the human design piece into the negotiation work I'm doing, and the executive coaching work I'm doing with my executive women leader clients. And if you'd like to know more about that, then you can find me on my website at gallantleader.com. And I'm always open to having a chat. and some of the new things I've got going on, if you're really interested in looking into your negotiation, then I can offer you what I'm currently calling, and I may change the name, but the substance doesn't change. The Nail Your Negotiation Audit. So it's a call where we look at some areas in your negotiation where you may want to shift. And as part of that, you get a copy of your human design blueprint, because that will have some answers for you. And I will point those out to you in the call. So that's also an offer. And if you want to book a call, you can even actually go directly to bookachatwithcarrie.com.
Oh, I love it.
Bookachatwithcarrie.com. And we'll get started.
That's great.
And that's a complimentary call, by the way. That's a complimentary call, because we're not yet working together. We're just having a call and an audit. And I'm happy to share that with your listeners.
That's awesome. And, it's good to get to know people as you start working together and set that time aside. And, I've asked my brothers and sisters, and nobody seems to know what time of day I was born. So I'm not sure.
We can still throw some out there. And what I would do in that case, Emily, is I can get your birth date, and I would plug it in, and I would run like a few times, like say 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and maybe like a 6 p.m. or something. Gotcha. And then we just see how much has shifted, and then we can kind of fine tune it. And again, it comes back to, in that case, it's really about your looking at the different ones and saying, oh, this one, that's me,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm probably going to take you up on that, because I'm very interested to figure that out.
I'd love to know too.
Yeah. I just wish my siblings had paid more attention to when I was born. They're 20 years older than I am. They should have known.
The only reason I knew was because my mom kept a little card from the hospital that had, a little baby card. It's a girl that had my time at the time that I was born. So thankfully, in that case, somebody wrote it down.
Yep, absolutely. Well, producer Ken, you were born at 1:46 p.m. So you're an afternoon baby.
Well, we can run his chart easily enough then.
Yeah, we should. It's funny because my daughter, who was born 12 years later, was like 12:46 a.m. And the difference just between the two personalities is pretty interesting to me. So
yeah. Well, there's usually always a few different types within a family unit as well. So that's pretty normal. And that's sometimes what causes the rubbing of the up against each other too, although the same types can rub each other as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. Carrie, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Emily. It's been a real pleasure. Lots of fun. It's
been so great. I've loved every minute of this conversation. I'm glad it finally worked out, because this has definitely been very interesting to me. And I love the work that you're doing. It's a very interesting topic, and I know our listeners are going to love it. So thank you for being here.
And thank you so much for having me. And I love the topic too, powered by authenticity. It really is the place where we get that drive is through that authenticity, when we can be our most authentic self.
Yep. And it doesn't feel good if you try to fake it. So it's
correct.
And producer Ken, thanks for being here tonight.
You got it.
Thanks, Ken.
Appreciate it. And as always, thanks to Go Art here in Batavia, New York. We get to use this beautiful podcast studio that they've gifted to us. It's been a year and a half now or so, and it's made available through a grant that they received. So we truly do appreciate the use of the community center. Carrie, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Emily.
All right. Have a good night. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for listening.